All right, let's get into this one. Let's actually talk about this physical book thing. Kriega Bundle. Welcome back to the library, everybody. I'm Tennessee Fats. As you know, when you're on this channel, what we're talking about here mostly is Conan the Barbarian and Robert E. Howard. And guess what we're doing today? Well, you saw a thumbnail back there. We are talking through the Conan and the Emerald Lotus story, which is the first story that's included in this book. That's right. This is the Conan and the City of the Dead, which is a collection that was put out in 2024, this year, which actually throws in an old 1995 book. And the second part of that story, or the second story written by that author at that time, that was never published then. Now, I'm not going to really get into a whole lot of the details of how that happened or why that happened or what happened there. If you guys really want to know, you can, by the way, that sound, that's you typing on the Google, by the way. Now, if it was me typing on the Google, it would look a lot like this. Slap, 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 slap. Because that's how I type. I type just like a platypus. It's a thing. Anyways, if you want to know, get yourself onto the Google and we'll check that out. Today, what I'm going to stick to is the story, okay? Today, Conan and the Emerald Lotus. So, spoiler alert now. I'm throwing this out here at the beginning of the video. I'm going to throw chapters in this video, all right? We're going to talk through some things. If there are certain things you don't want to know, look at the titles of the chapters, skip it on through. If you don't want to know anything that I have to say, well, you probably don't want to watch this video because, well, this is going to be me talking about the story. I'm going to ruin some of it. What I am going to do for you guys, though, is I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk about the characters that are involved, at least some of the most important characters that I thought were involved. I'm going to give you a general sense of what the story follows, like, you know, here's the overarching thing. And then I'm going to point out some really cool things at the end that if you haven't read this yet, I would encourage you to keep an eye on these things. These are ones that sort of maybe go, huh, because they were just like those loose threads you just want to pull. If you keep your eye out for them when you're reading it, maybe you're going to have a different point of view from what I had, and we can down below in the comments, and you guys can let me know what you think. All right, without any further ado, spoiler alert done. Let's get into what this actual story is. All right, let's get into what the story is here. Now, to do this part and try to make it as spoiler-free as possible, we're going to talk to the map today. There's a lot of detail here, and I know if I start saying, listen, the story involves this and that and the other thing, I'm just going to go, you guys are going to be going, oh, Tennessee Fats, you're ruining all of it for me. So what we're going to do is just a quick overarch here. Effectively, this is a story of two quests. Okay, that's all you need to know. Two quests. And where it happens is here. Akaria. I think I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. Many of you, feel free to correct me down the bottom because you probably know the correct pronunciation of this. This is in Shem. This is a city, and this is where the story starts. And that's where the first quest occurs. Now, this quest isn't necessarily one that Conan does by choice, but it's a quest nonetheless. The resolution of that particular quest is a journey. And this journey is a very interesting one. Now, this whole area within the Hyborian world is really a hotbed. For those of you who are Robert E. Howard fans, you know that the Shem, Stygia, Kush, this whole area down here is just a mess. And quite frankly put, Conan gets into a lot of trouble when he heads down there. He knows the area, he's been there before, and he's got to go back. And the story basically, and we're going to try to follow this map here as best I can. I believe it travels a fair amount this way, east inside Shem. At some points in time, it crosses south into Stygia by crossing the river Styx, and then it goes through a massive desert trek. Now, the desert trek, I would argue, is beyond this whole Bakhur River. So perhaps they cross over here somewhere, closer to the city of Set, and they head down to the desert and head towards Petion. I think I'm saying Tion? Tion. That would be probably the pronunciation if that's correct. They don't go into Tion, though. Tion, for you Robert E. Howard fans, you know there's some background to this one. You know there's some history. This means something, but the entire adventure takes place then down here, around the deserts in some rather rocky terrain. Very interesting story where really you've got these two quests happening, effectively as you have a bunch of people pinballing around between three different wizards, or sorcerers as the case may be. Really neat. So as I say, in the middle of the Hyborian world, right down here, Akaria, across, down, and over to Tion. Interesting tale. That's all I'm going to give you. All right, so we talked through the overarching story. And again, I didn't want to give too much away there, which is why we flipped this whole thing around. We went and spent some time talking about geographically where this goes. And we talked about the fact that really I said this is an adventure of two quests. Underneath that, though, is something I'm going to call the pinball effect between three sorcerers. And I'm saying that for a reason, and I'm specifically saying three for a reason. For those of you who have read the story, you know why I'm saying three. Although there could be an asterisk there for a fourth. No spoilers. No spoilers here. So I'm sticking with the three. Here's the names and here's who their flunkies are. Okay? And I'm going to name it in this way because really I want you guys to get a sense of keeping an eye out for these three mega arching sort of influences, but then recognizing that their influences are being really brought to fruition by their flunkies, which is kind of a funny thing because, you know, a sorcerer you would picture being out there just, you know, doing the whole Black Sabbath thing. People get quiet when he walks by. It's a scary thing because he does things, but you know, it's the flunkies that are out there really using these machinations to move forward. So the first one is Ethram Fall and his flunky Ath. Now, this is the big guy in the story. This, and I don't mean guy in a sexist way. I mean, this is the big problem in the story. There you go. We'll go with that phrase. The big problem in the story. This guy, well, yeah, he's got plans. He's got plans. And he's out there using his plans. He's off in the distance in this whole, which we aren't going to go into here further. It's a great piece of Hyborian Age lore. And he has a beautiful piece of Robert E. Howard lore backstory. Keep an eye out for that. There's a very particular chapter in here where you look at it and you might say, oh, where does this fit into the overall story? It's there specifically to tie into that piece of Robert E. Howard lore. And when you see it, you will see it. All right, so there's Ethram Fall and Ath. They're doing their thing, and they're a problem, okay? Ethram Fall starts into motion this problem between Shakar and his flunky Golbanda, and Zalandra and her flunkies, she has two by the way, of Nisa and Hang Shi. Now, Golbanda, he becomes a material problem. He becomes a material issue, which is drawn into a really cool piece of almost Lovecraftian-like horror, which draws through the whole story. And you will see him become more and more of a powerful character as the story goes on, where his sorcerer becomes less and less of an important character as the story goes on. Really, his power, because, well, I'm going to spoil it, shifts to Golbanda. Golbanda then becomes his avatar in the story that moves forward. Zalandra does actually actively engage and does a fair amount of hands-on activities in the story. There's a beautiful conflict scene at one point in time in a desert, two actual ones, where she really shows her stuff. She's proven to be a powerful individual that can deal with the real world, which is funny because the other characters throughout the story seem to spend a lot of, at least the background characters, seem to spend a lot of the time trying to draw out the point that she's kind of useless. Or at least that's the insult they're trying to make, which turns out to be the exact opposite of the truth. Now, Nisa and Hang Shi, these are probably the two most powerful flunkies in the whole story. Nisa ends up getting into, well, listen, we all know Conan is the Rico Suave of the Hyborian Age. We know something's going to happen here, okay? So I'm not throwing that much of a spoiler out there. She's very important, though. Hang Shi, though, and I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly, is hellishly important. And honestly, I think is one of the more prominent characters in the story. Hang Shi, I would argue, should probably develop into something more if given the opportunity. And those are really the three sorcerers that we're bouncing around in here. You've got, as I say, these flunkies. You've got Ath, Golbanda, and Nisa and Shang Shi, who are really the avatars that are making the overall machinations of these three sorcerers come through fruition. Kind of a cool dialogue and kind of a neat way they bounce around in this one. So those are the characters. I'm not going into every single one because there's a lot of other ones in here. Let's get into some of the cool things now. Now, this part, this is probably going to have more spoilers in it. All right, let's talk about some really cool things that are within this story because there are some really neat things that John C. Hawking has done in here. And one of the most important things that I think he's done is he's really grabbed onto the Robert E. Howard method of putting layer upon layer upon layer in your story. Now, I'm not throwing out any spoilers by saying this, but I am going to tell you this. Everybody in this story has a purpose. There's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why they come in and go out, or there's a reason why they stay in the story all the way through. And John C. Hawking has done a very good job of going back, looking at what Robert E. Howard did, when he wrote, which we've referenced here on many, many, many occasions when we talk about Robert E. Howard books, is the layers. The layers underneath each character, and how Robert E. Howard always used to do this wonderful thing of leaving these threads in the stories that make you go, oh, wait a minute, what is that ghost in the dungeon? That thing was in a well and it came out of nowhere. What the hell is that? Or, you know, who the hell is this giant Colossus guy that everybody's terrified in this battle? He was taken out easy enough. Why was he so important? These are all these little tidbits that Robert E. Howard put in where you know there's a material backstory, but all you're given is the surface within the actual story you're reading today. What that does is it creates this wonderful sense of there's more waiting for me on the next page. Not necessarily the next page in this book, but maybe in the next book or the book after that. It tells you that this author is literally baiting you, saying, hey, look, there will be more to this if given the opportunity. Now, there's a couple in here where that was really, really well done with at least two named characters that I can think of. The first one being Cetrus, and the second one being Timotum. I think I'm saying that correctly. Now, it's funny. A lot of people are going to say, Tennessee Fats, Timotum. What? If you've read the story, you're going to say, there's a reason here. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to throw any more spoilers on. But the last one here, the giant elephant in the room, and this is something that I hope is covered in the next part of this book, which I will be reviewing later, is Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep. Yes, that's the name. I'm saying it here. This thing, or guy, or god, or whatever the heck it is, literally is the big thing. All the rest of this entire story surrounding physically Nyarlathotep is a wonderful story. But really, at the end of the day, you clearly get a sense that the larger looming issue, the Lovecraftian elder god type thing in the background is Nyarlathotep. It's him, or her, or it, or whatever the heck it is. I hope we see more of that in the next story. Because again, it's this wonderful job of, well, here's the thread, Tennessee Fats, so you're going to pull at it. And when you're reading, you're probably going to get to the exact same point. That's one thing that I thought was really well done in this story. The second thing that I thought was really well done in this story was actually the way, and I referenced this earlier, you had not just these larger-than-life sorcerers taking part in the story, but you had their flunkies. It was the use of the flunkies that really brought this Lovecraftian level type horror, which is so far above like a Conan level of dealing with, down to something where you're like, okay, well, I'm a human being. I can actually deal with this now. It brings this back down to reasonableness for us. It makes it relatable. It's like, oh, okay, well, I just need to climb that wall. As opposed to, oh, the universe is on fire. Totally different scope. But because you're able to actually draw it down through these avatars and see the actual enactment, it suddenly makes so much more sense. You connect to it better. It's a wonderful job. Last piece that I think was incredibly well done here is in the descriptives. Now, I've talked descriptives before, and I know there are some authors that will go forever. Look at Homer. Like when you read the Iliad and you have an entire stanza dedicated to the depiction of a battle scene on one guy's shield that's actually in the battle that's happening right now, because we need to waste the stanza saying, well, you know, on his shield, you got this guy over here with this helmet, and he's carrying a pickaxe. And like, it's stupid level detail. And that was very important then to that audience. To us today, that's not. We focus more on surface. If we really want to deep dive, we will deep dive. We have the opportunity to do that later. And I'm hoping that this author will be given the chance to give us those deep dives on some of those things that I said we just scratched the surface on earlier. But the depictions and the descriptions were wonderfully done. I can think of one particular one, which happens to take place in a desert, with what I'm going to call a well. And for those of you who have read it, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who haven't read it, when you get there, pay attention. Literally in one paragraph, you have the complete set, the overall setup done. And it's done in such a way where you have the entire vision in your mind. It was incredibly concise and incredibly well done. So those are really what I would argue to be the three kicker points on this one that were incredibly well done, which is why I would say, nice book. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up here. So we'll do this fairly concisely because, again, this is only book one of the two that are in this actual Conan City of the Dead. I'll show the image up for you guys over here again. This was a really cool story. John C. Hawking, I think, did a really good job of grabbing our attention, pulling us in, but then at the same time not burying us in too much overarching noise. And unfortunately, that is something that happens. When people are world building, they spend a lot of time throwing the background material in, which is very important. But in this case, John had the advantage in that it's already built for him. He just needed to put it in the universe we all know and love. It was really, really well done. And I think John did an excellent job of giving us those threads. You know, those loose little threads that are along the way that Robert E. Howard did such a wonderful job of all those years ago, saying, wow, I wish I knew more about that. And I'm hoping that John gets the chance to dive more into this over time. Now, I haven't read book 2 within this omnibus, we'll call it that, yet. And I guess the next steps are, well, I gotta do that. And we'll get to that, and we'll do another video review of that then. But I guess one of the important questions I would ask myself now is, in just reading the first story here, does it substantiate buying this book? Yeah, I'd say it does. You know, the interesting aspect here is really the next story to this, where I'm at right now, could honestly be complete and utter garbage. I don't suspect it will be, given what I've read in the first story, but it could be. And I would still be adequately happy enough with what I've read in the first book to say, yes, yeah, this was entirely worth buying. I'm happy with this. This was a good purchase, and honestly, well done. Yeah, kind of a fun piece so far, and I'm really enjoying this. Now, again, had to do this one relatively spoiler-free. There is a lot that I want to say here for you guys. There's a lot that I want to talk about here, but honestly, I don't know how many of you have read this, and I really don't want to ruin this for those of you who haven't read it yet. Just wanted to give you some, here's the direction they go in. Here's some things to be aware of. Watch out for these guys. Really an interesting piece. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next video. It's Easter egg time. It's time for us to have a chat. Move the world's noisiest chair over here about what is, quite frankly put, the biggest elephant in the room, really, within these two stories. Now, I was never aware of this, and it was actually one of you viewers that pointed this out to me. I believe it was Charles. Charles, I believe you're the one that pointed this out to me. That there's actually a story that takes place between these two. That's right. You've got Conan and the Emerald Lotus, and then you've got the Living Plague, I think is the second one. there's something that goes in between. And there's a story called Black Starlight, which takes place immediately after Conan the Emerald Lotus. Now, when I sat down to read this and I found that out, I went, oh, okay. And when I found out about it, they pointed out, oh, it was republished as part of a 12-part novella in the 2019 Conan the Barbarian comic run that came out of Marvel. I thought, 2019 Conan the Barbarian Marvel? Just so happens, I have a giant hardcover collection of that right here. This is going to be awesome. I don't need to go out and buy anything. It's all right here. I said, I am very excited about this. And boy, am I ever going to stop reading as soon as I hit that midpoint so that I can grab that novella and read it from front to back. Because clearly, if there's a middle piece, I got to know. That's the little OCD in the back of my head. Here's what I found out when I opened that hardcover. It's not in there. Now, this is going to take me to an entirely different rant. And the rant that I'm going to give you today is, why would you make a giant hardcover collection of these things and not include this particular novel? Now, this is, maybe this is just one of those things where I'm in the wrong. But it would occur to me that if you're republishing the 12 issues that are part of the story, and the 12 issues include a novella, maybe you just want to stick that in the back. Now, it could be a rights issue. It could be some sort of a copyright thing. I have no idea. I'm not in the biz. I'm going to assume that's probably the case. But at least I do have some of these pieces. If you look, I actually have this one right here. This is Conan the Barbarian #1. It says right down in the bottom, includes part 1 of an all-new Conan novella. Yeah. The problem being is I've never really gone out and collected this run and finished it because I had this. Well, guess what I get to do now? I get to go buy the other half of this run that I'm still missing. I only have 6 of the 12. I have multiple copies of #1. I even one that's a Sienkiewicz cover that's, I think, signed, which is pretty cool, actually, to look at. But either way, I'm going to have to go pick those up. So there is actually a third part to this story. So word to the wise, for those of you who don't know yet, Charles, thank you very much for pointing it out to me. It's called, what is it called? Black Starlight. There you go. Black Starlight is the name of it. It was a 12-part series. It was published as part of the 2019 Conan the Barbarian series. It's in 12 issues of that. If you do think to yourself, I'm going to go pick up the hardcover or the trade and it'll be in there, it ain't there. Save yourself the money. Looks like you're going to have to go actually pick up the books. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to caveat this right now. My understanding is it has been e-published. For those of you who can actually sit down and read an e-published book, enjoy that. For those of you like me who can't stand reading a screen, well, happy hunting. You're going to have to go buy some books.